Hold on to your hats as we head into a week tinged with pumpkin spice, spooky surprises, and the chilling, spine-tingling flood of election news. As things turn heatedly political across the U.S. Well, here we prefer to deal with a different kind of heat. We certainly have a lot of it in Texas, temperatures pushing 90 degrees. Arizona looking at 100 this weekend, just on the verge of breaking even more all-time records. We'll cover more of that in just a bit. Looking at the eastern Pacific, Hurricane Kristy still 110 knots, making that a high-end Category 3 storm. We go back to October 23rd when we did the show on Wednesday, and there we had that really intense strengthening up to Category 4. Then yesterday, it did reach Category 5, bottomed out at 926 millibars. However, today it has filled to 952 millibars, moving west-northwest at 14 miles an hour. Conditions around that storm becoming increasingly unfavorable, and it should be just about completely gone by Sunday. Well, thankfully nothing like that going on here in the U.S. The weather here dominated by this polar front extending from Lake Erie all the way down into the Ozarks and into Texas. Northerly flow in Oklahoma City and Amarillo, and further south, a triple point located around Ranger, Texas, with a dry line extending into the Edwards Plateau. West of that dry line, dew points in the 30s. To the east, however, dew points in the 60s as we start bringing up some of that tropical moisture from the Gulf, interacting with this frontal zone. However, not really enough moisture or instability to support storms along that front, but there could be a few weak ones in the Ozarks into Kentucky. Over in the Northeast, they're pulling out the sweaters and maybe grabbing a warm beverage like tea or coffee. Cool weather prevails as stagnant weather and long wave troughing off the East Coast drives a seemingly unending flow of cold air advection through the region. Highs today in the 50s with 60s from New York into Baltimore. And you probably saw that massive clouds over the eastern Great Lakes. What is that? Well, that is a shortwave trough right there. This is 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. And then during the evening, it shifts rapidly to the east and pretty much offshore by late tonight. Some of our viewers do like looking at the Q vectors, and we do see an area of upward motion across the eastern Great Lakes, shifting rapidly during the evening into Maine. This trailing area of downward motion across New York, and then we get into an indeterminate pattern late tonight as channeled flow takes over the area. So you can relate that to the satellite picture. There's the area of stronger upward motion moving across New York. And the water vapor imagery shows that a little bit more clearly. There comes that area of downward motion across the eastern Great Lakes, and that'll move into New England later tonight. There's the 250 millibar chart showing that subtropical jet in the Gulf and across Florida. The main polar front jet well up to the north. Typically this time of year we find that shifting southward into the U.S., However, this week that's not the case. A couple of branches out there in the western U.S. keeping things active, but the fact that this thing is still locked up in Canada, that's one reason that many parts of the country are in a drought. Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, they've had their share of rain for sure. Many of the rivers in northern Florida are still at flood stage, but those levels are gradually coming down. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to Texas. And there it is, 90 degrees from Austin into College Station. So the air conditioners will continue to work overtime. In Houston, 88 degrees with 65-degree dew points. News headlines covering a major campaign rally there, entertainment show going on at Shell Stadium. Up to the north in Dallas, 85 over 62. But we hit the Red River, and there is the cold front. It's not going to come very far south. You can see up to the north, not much of a push of cold air. Upper 70s up there in northern Oklahoma, 60s in Kansas. If that was a strong front this time of year, we would expect to see 40s and 50s. In the northern plains, a little bit of good news around the Chicago Quad Cities area. They got some beneficial rains last night. A drought going on there too. In Wisconsin, Neil Robinson, one of our viewers, reporting the Indian summer ending in southern Wisconsin, 59 for a high there with 34 for tonight. Freeze warning in northwestern Kansas for tonight, Oberlin, Norton, Hoxie, and across the border in Nebraska for McCook, temperatures down to 27. Frost advisories further to the west in the Goodland forecast area. Frost advisory extending into Colorado near Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and for Kit Carson and Eads, they could be down to 32 tonight. In Billings, they got their first freeze this season, 30 degrees. That ties the sixth latest freeze on record. That signifies the strong ridging and downslope warming we've been seeing pretty much the past week there in the Great Plains. The heat has invaded the southwestern deserts once again, upper 90s today around Phoenix and Tucson. Yesterday at Plutarco in northwestern Mexico, they reached 115 degrees. The San Joaquin Valley decided they're not going to have any of that. They're staying out of that mess. Highs there today running 77 at Redding to 87 at Bakersfield. However, if we shift that satellite frame a little bit further to the west, we can see that things are becoming active. What looks like a shortwave across northeastern California and a stronger system offshore. Of course, we should always look at that water vapor imagery. That'll shed a little bit of light of what's going on. And there we do see a major shortwave moving into the Great Basin area, not really picking up that other system offshore. But the surface chart's definitely showing that. And there it is, lurking off of the Oregon coast, extending southward as a frontal boundary. So clearly we have to move that imagery a little bit further north, and we do find that compact system heading for the Washington coast. We've got a variety of wind warnings, gale warnings all through this area right here, including from the Canadian Weather Service. The 500 millibar heights and vorticities showing that punch of upper-level energy moving onshore later tonight and into the Vancouver-Bellingham area around midnight. For aviation weather, we're looking for light to moderate icing and turbulence through that area, mountain obscuration, and gusty surface winds. Wind shear also a possibility at many of the terminals through the Pacific Northwest area. And there's that weather system as it appeared late this afternoon, just a few hours ago. Occluded front heading for the British Columbia coast, and that will cause problems in southeastern Alaska. The Juneau area, Juneau located right in here, they are under a high wind warning tonight. Northeast winds 25 gusting to 60 miles an hour. That includes downtown Juneau. Also, we have wind warnings for Prince of Wales Island, gusts to 60 miles an hour, and gale warnings all throughout the straits through those areas. And on top of that, we're looking for a significant snowfall possible around Haines and Skagway for Tuesday. Further north, well, gale warnings as you would expect throughout the Gulf of Alaska, the Bering Sea area. Seas running about 6 feet with wind gusts to 45 miles an hour. No problems in the interior, but you can see how much of a cool down they've had. Teens and single digits down to about 4 degrees. I think that's Bettles. I don't really know those stations too well. Snow coming down on the north slope. And out in Canada, as we mentioned, those wind warnings around the Vancouver Island up through eastern Victoria Island. Further to the east, an area of showers and thunderstorms in western Ontario. And then in the Maritimes, wraparound from this occlusion affecting central Newfoundland around Gander all the way down to Cape Breton. They're expecting another quarter to half inch of rain, and then gradually things should start shutting down for tomorrow. Well, that's just incredible. We got through the entire analysis workup in less than 10 minutes. So that leaves a little bit of time for the icing on the cake, the forecast charts, the specialized graphics, such as this, the 500 millibar chart for North America. And that shows that very progressive flow. The long waves are not really doing very much, and we've got this persistent Hudson Bay low. But let's take a look at the weather over the next several days. Yeah, very large disturbance along the west coast of North America and the southern trough out there in Quebec and the Maritimes. The western trough comes on shore for Monday and Tuesday. That will bring some inclement weather across the Great Basin and Rockies going into next week. However, this trough will lift to the northeast, so not really doing much for that ongoing drought. Another trough descends the backside. What does that do? Well, that lifts northeast as well. All right. However, we do have this cutoff low digging in for next weekend. So that could be a little bit of a wild card. That's the last frame I have, so we'll just circle back to this for next week and see what that's doing. But you can see that this general ridginess is holding tight across much of the Midwest. And of course, with that, an ongoing drought. Yeah, there it is, the bad news. This is just depressing. Seems like the only areas that are not in a drought are the ones affected by the hurricane remnants. Some parts of the Northeast, they've had that persistent interaction between cold advection and residual moisture. The Four Corners not looking too bad, and parts of the West Coast also appear to be running near normal. But elsewhere, Texas, Oklahoma, a drought, and of course in the Midwest, really getting hit hard there in Ohio and West Virginia. You can see the trend there with the soil moisture over the past 3 months. It has really dried out across the central states, especially East Texas, Iowa, Minnesota, the Sioux Falls area, all of that. That pretty much corresponds to that persistent upper-level ridginess that we've had across that area. The western U.S. has been under the influence of troughing to a greater extent, which has helped alleviate those moisture problems out there. And of course, there's a different kind of moisture we deal with, and that's the moisture in the atmosphere. This represents the moisture through a column in the troposphere, and we kind of measure how much could be squeezed out if we could condense all of it and make it fall into a rain gauge. So evidently, we do have some moisture starting to work up through Texas, Arkansas, into the Ohio River Valley. That's pretty much right along that front that we've got in that area today. Up to the north, though, drier air. And this moisture that we see on this plot, that's sort of a tracer that indicates the air mass source region. So here, this is coming either from Canada or from the mid and upper levels, which tend to be dry this time of year. And as we go forward through the remainder of the weekend and into next week, moisture hanging around Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, starting to infiltrate north into Minnesota and Iowa ahead of the next frontal system for Monday. And you can see that by the time we get into midweek, we're already building about 1.5 to 2 inches through the southern U.S., another moisture surge for next weekend. So we're going to be kind of stuck in this weather pattern in the central U.S. for the foreseeable future, at least until maybe the first or second week of November. Things may get a little bit active there in the Caribbean going into next week and the following week. Let's take a look at the plots out there. This is basically the moisture advection. This is the IVT chart, and it shows the pressures as well. So by next week, well, there's that fetch of strong Gulf moisture feeding northward into Texas and Oklahoma. For later during the week, yeah, a couple lows showing up near the Dominican Republic and off the coast of Nicaragua. So by the time we get into next Friday, about a week from now, things look a little bit disturbed around Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, and off of southern Florida. But this is really too far out to forecast very accurately. So this will have to be something that we need to watch. But the deterministic model, basically going for some sort of tropical storm or depression off of Cuba and the Bahamas. But really, the exact position, the track, all of that, that is just not really forecastable this far out. We may have a better idea of that by next Tuesday or Wednesday. So check back in on Forecast Lab for next week, and we should have maybe a better picture of what's going to happen. We do see that towards next weekend, looking at the detrimental effects chart, the shear, which is indicated by the blue, does slacken off around Cuba, the Caribbean, and Haiti. So a little bit of opening up of favorable conditions around that part of the Atlantic basin. So again, this will have to be watched. We don't know the details, but it does look like a little peak in activity maybe coming up in about a week. So let's take a look at the weather for tonight, and we do see that system coming into the northwestern U.S. Heavy rains across western Washington, and that'll move gradually inland for tomorrow. For Saturday, high pressure continues to cover much of the northeastern U.S., highs in the 50s and 60s with a few 40s in the mountains of the northeast. Saturday night could see a hard freeze across much of northern New England, the Adirondacks, and the Allegheny region. Temperatures down to 23 to 29 degrees. In the southeastern U.S., this frontal boundary delineating a difference between cold air up to the north, looking at maybe 60s and 70s. Down to the south, though, 80s, and even a few 90s possible in the Florida Panhandle. In the plains, 80s and 90s through Texas. Could see a few weak storms in the Arklatex region near this cyclone developing along this wave right there on the frontal boundary. In the southwestern U.S., miserable conditions. Phoenix warming up to 100 degrees. The latest 100-degree temperature on record, that was set October 27th, 2016. So we're awfully close to that. In the northwestern U.S., massive increase in rain with another wave moving onshore. Then we go into Sunday. There's that hard freeze there in the northeastern U.S. During the afternoon on Sunday, massive downslope across the northern plains. We're going to be seeing highs rise to 79 at Denver and 79 at Rapid City with 70s in Montana. High wind watch in effect through the foothills of northern Montana, Great Falls to Browning, could be gusting up to 70 miles an hour. Still seeing 90s in Phoenix and Tucson, and extensive rains all through the Pacific Northwest, some of that in the form of snow. In the Sierras, snow levels will run about 8,000 feet with minimal impacts, mostly Sunday night into Tuesday. Further north in the Cascades could see 3 to 6 inches of snow. Snow levels about 4,500 feet. Additional snows picking up in the Salmon River Mountains and the Bitterroots with a couple of inches possible. So it'll be good to have your snow tires and chains in order if you're going to be driving those areas early next week. Then we head into Monday, a major cool down through the Great Basin area. Highs fall into the 40s and 50s at places like Reno, Boise, and Winnemucca. Freeze event through a wide area for Monday night, and even colder for Tuesday. Snow levels will reach the valley floors in northern Nevada Monday night with 1 to 2 inches of snow possible. In the plains, stout southerly flow with heat punching into Kansas, 91 at Medicine Lodge, 88 at Salina, and 81 at Kansas City. For Tuesday, a stout warm advection pattern through the Central Plains. This could be a very windy day through the Panhandles, gusts 40 to 50 miles an hour possible through that area. Much colder in the western U.S., temperatures falling sharply to 77 for a high at Phoenix and 74 at Tucson. A hard freeze across all of the Rockies, the Great Basin area. Teens for northern Nevada, down to 7 degrees at Yellowstone, 15 at Butte and Bozeman. Salt Lake City down to 34, Denver down to 32. That's going to be on Tuesday night. Extensive rain and snow showers throughout that area, mostly during the day, and rain setting up in the Great Lakes ahead of this wave. For Wednesday, the cold air moves into the northern plains, rain breaking out in the Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas area, and then we head into Halloween, October 31st. This is how things are looking during the evening, so maybe a bit rainy across Ohio, Indiana, blustery conditions in Chicago and Michigan, so very much Halloween-like weather. Maybe a taste of that in North Texas and Oklahoma, and another frontal system moving into the western U.S., and we'll just go through the following weekend. Yep, very active in the western U.S. The GFS latching onto this idea of a tropical storm or hurricane in the Bahamas. That is going to change significantly, most likely. We'll just have to check back in on that next week. And there you have it. That's the forecast. This looks a little bit more like early winter, so we'll just have to see how that plays out. So just a reminder, your Patreon support is greatly appreciated. And if you can't do Patreon, just head to weathergraphics.com and pick up a copy of one of my books or software programs. And if you can't do that, leave a comment or subscribe. That is also appreciated. So I'm sure one of those things will work for you. We'll be back again on Monday for the supporters and on Wednesday for everybody else. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.